Well, Mike, a grand jury voted to indict Daniel Penny in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely on a New York City subway early last month. If convicted, Daniel could face up to 19 years in jail. Let's bring in criminal defense and civil rights attorney Brian Claypool. He's joining me now. So, Mr. Claypool, did the grand jury get it right?
Hey, Arthel, great to be back with you. While this is an unfortunate, tragic death of Jordan Neely, I think it's going to be very difficult for Alvin Bragg's office to secure a conviction, and for two big reasons. I mean, number one, we live in dangerous times, Arthel. Times have changed. I mean, I know out here in Los Angeles, we've had several innocent people murdered by homeless people. And so I think you're going to have jurors that are going to look at this and say, hey, wait a minute. What was Penny supposed to do? Was he supposed to wait while Jordan was yelling out, I want to die, I'm going to hurt people, and wait until it's too late and maybe pulls out a gun or a knife? So I think that's going to be a real challenge for the jury. And then I think the second, even bigger hurdle for Bragg, and why I don't think there'll ever be a conviction, is Daniel Penny himself. I mean, this is a former Marine vet, Arthel, spent 4 years in the Marines, and he did what a lot of us don't do sometimes. That is, step up in the midst of a potential harm. How many videotapes have we seen over the years of somebody getting beaten or punched or hurt, and nobody jumps in to help? That's what Penny did. And he's an articulate young man. He speaks well. He's going to humanize what happened inside that subway. And many of those jurors, Arthel, are going to perceive him as a hero.
Okay. So, Brian, do me a favor, because you're a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. So let's take your kind of personal scope out of it and just give me kind of like the nuts and bolts of what would you think, because I don't want you to argue for or against. Just what do you think is the strongest argument for defense?
Well, for the defense is that Penny perceived harm. The law in New York is that he does not have to wait until there is a bad situation before he intervenes. And he perceived objectively that he was in harm's way and that other people were in harm's way. So his lawyers are going to argue under the law in New York, he's allowed to intervene and use reasonable force to subdue Jordan Neely. The prosecutor is going to argue, hey, look, you used too much force. But Penny's team is going to argue, look, how do you know how much is too much force? And then also, you're going to have the autopsy. We don't even have the toxicology report yet.
So now, strongest argument for prosecutors. You touched on it, but give me your best shot.
Yeah, I think prosecutors are going to argue, remember the tragic Eric Garner death that resulted from a chokehold used by NYPD officers. So I think prosecutors are going to argue, look, police officers can't even use a chokehold. Why is Daniel Penny allowed to use a chokehold? And I think their second argument is going to be, at the time that Jordan Neely died, he didn't pose a significant threat of imminent grave bodily harm to Daniel Penny, and that therefore the amount of force used by Penny was excessive and unnecessary.
Is there anything that could derail this case before it goes to trial?
Yeah, great question, Arthel. I kind of touched on it a little bit. I think the toxicology report is going to be really important in this case. And we don't even know whether the grand jury saw that, because typically it takes 30 to 45 days to get a toxicology report. Grand jury may have reached a decision before they even saw it. Why is that important? Because it might reveal that there were certain drugs in Jordan Neely's system. I'm not saying he was on drugs, but if the toxicology report shows a large amount of drugs, that could lead to an issue of causation, right? Prosecutors have to prove that Penny's conduct caused.
How so? I'm a little confused because, look, we all saw the video. I wasn't there. You weren't there. Eyewitnesses were there. But I don't follow your argument of, depending on how much drugs were in his system, that whether or not that's going to make a difference or not. Because it seems like, as I know what you may say, that if he was hyped up on drugs, somehow he's so strong that it took that much power to subdue him. But again, based on the video, and it's all I can go by, it seemed like Mr. Neely was pretty, subdued quite quickly. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I've been involved in many cases involving police excessive force. And I've been in many cases involving what's called excited delirium. That is an issue it's come up for years with cases like this. And what it means is if somebody is on a certain type of drug, that could cause them to be excited and hyperactive to a point where it may cause a heart attack. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that Penny didn't choke him, but you have to, and by the way, you got to look and see, were there any broken bones in the larynx? Were there any ligature marks on Jordan Neely's neck? But his lawyers are going to dig into that. And I'm not saying that happened, but look, it's been proven that if you're on a large amount of different drugs, that can cause your heart to exacerbate and could cause a heart attack.
Well, I get it. I understand your point, but we don't know what happened, so we want to. But I really appreciate your, again, just kind of doing your best to call balls and strikes for us, because it's a complicated case and it's really just unfortunate, quite frankly, across the board. Brian Claypool, we'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arthel.